For hundreds of years, the gallows stood as an austere attribute of amends throughout Europe and beyond. To those who lived below its shadow, blind was not aloof of punishment. It was an alarming accessible comedy advised to humiliate, intimidate, and destroy. While avant-garde films about portray blind as a quick afterlife acquired by a breeze neck, the absoluteness for best of history was far added brutal. In truth, the gallows was feared absolutely because blind was usually a slow, painful, and ambiguous way to die. Before the 19th century, executions by blind rarely complex a connected fall. Instead, prisoners were about hoisted upwards by ladders, winches, or carts fatigued from below their feet. This meant the victim's clothes did not break. Instead, the asphyxiate shamed the throat and claret vessels, boring acid off oxygen to the brain. Afterlife came through suffocation and belted claret breeze rather than burning trauma. What followed was about disturbing to witness. The accursed actuality could abide acquainted for 1 to 3 minutes, absolutely acquainted that they were suffocating. During this time they frequently gasped for breath, clawed at the rope, and affronted uncontrollably. Their face swelled and blurred as oxygen denial took hold. Their eyes arched and their argot about protruded from their mouth. Complete afterlife. Ability booty anywhere from 10 to 20 account connected afterwards. The victim had chock-full authoritative advised movements. This abiding attempt was one of the key affidavit that the gallows becoming such an alarming reputation. Afterlife was slow, visible, and acutely undignified. To accomplish affairs worse, executions were about alarmingly improvised. There was no accepted adjustment or accurate compassionate of how blind should be performed. Executioners were craftsmen, not medical professionals, and the mechanics of afterlife were ailing understood. Ropes assorted in array and elasticity. The bondability be placed too aerial below the jaw or too low beyond the windpipe. Sometimes the braiding slipped or stretched, declining to annihilate properly. In abounding cases, prisoners deadened for connected periods afore assuredly falling unconscious. Occasionally, the accursed did not die at all. There are recorded cases of bodies actually cut bottomward too soon, alone to appearance signs of life. If this happened, Admiral would artlessly rehang the victim until afterlife was certain. The abhorrence of absolute one blind and actuality affected to abide addition was broadly aside and added to accessible dread. In the 19th century, reformers attempted to accomplish blind added accommodating by developing the alleged connected drop. The abstraction was to account the breadth of the abatement so the close could breach instantly, ensuring a sleep and accelerated death, yet alike this adjustment accepted unreliable. If the bead was too short, the victim deadened boring as before. Now, if the bead was too long, the force could decapitate the condemned, disturbing the arch apple pie off the anatomy in advance of abashed witnesses. Several such accidents are accurate in British and American records. Addition aspect that agitated abhorrence of the gallows was its accessible nature. Hangings were advisedly staged as accumulation events. Tens of bags of bodies could appear executions, decidedly in places like Tyburn and London. Accursed prisoners were paraded through the streets to the scaffold, subjected to jeers, mockery, and sometimes concrete corruption from the crowd. Vendors awash aliment and alcohol whilst families watched the comedy together. It was allotment punishment, allotment entertainment. Standing on the beheading barrow or scaffold, the captive was actively acquainted not alone of abutting death, but of actuality absolutely apparent to enemies, analytical strangers, and alike old acquaintances. Their aftermost moments were not clandestine or solemn, but candidly humiliating. Every gasp, twitch, and attempt abundant before auspicious or bashful crowds. Alike afterwards death, corruption about continued. Bodies were sometimes larboard blind for hours or caniculed to rot publicly. Others were placed in adamant cages, alleged gibbets forth roadsides as warnings to travelers. Abounding families were denied permission to balance the body, preventing able burial. This final abasement circuitous the terror the gallows threatened. Not alone death, but additionally the stripping abroad of address and remembrance. Visually, blind was a barbarous spectacle. Unlike methods advised to adumbrate suffering, the gallows presented affliction in abounding view. Assemblage frequently declared the anatomy jerking violently, the bark darkening, saliva drooling from the mouth, and the close addition unnaturally below the rope's pressure. It was absurd to attending abroad from the concrete affliction of addition dying by strangulation. Psychological abhorrence was aloof as almighty as concrete pain. Prisoners waited weeks or months in awkward cells, alive absolutely how their afterlife would occur, apparent apathetic and about degrading. The beheading procession, the massive crowd, the ascent to the platform, and the moment the asphyxiate was placed about their neck, accumulated to actualize and cutting alarm connected afore the absolute dying began. The gallows was accordingly feared not artlessly as an agency of execution, but as a busy arrangement of punishment. It attenuated abiding affliction with base acknowledgement and ritualized accessible cruelty. Over execution methods ability annihilate bound or privately, but blind affected the accursed to die slow, visibly and below the boring of thousands. In the end, the gallows and its austere acceptability because it embodied aggregate bodies feared about death, suffocation rather than abrupt accident of consciousness, accessible abasement instead of dignity, and ambiguity instead of certainty. It was not alone an accessory to end a life. It was a date on which adversity was performed as admonishing to all who watched. The aggregate of agony, terror, spectacle, and abasement is why for centuries the gallows remained one of the best alarming and barbarous beheading methods in animal history. Thanks for watching. If you did acquisition this interesting, maybe bang subscribe. Thanks afresh for watching one of these videos.